Alrighty, welcome to Unreal Engine Indie. Today we're going to go over how easy it is to get going with C++ and Unreal Engine. So the first thing we need to do is create a project. So when you launch the Unreal Engine launcher, just click on Games, click on Third Person, and you want to choose C++, Desktop Maximum. And we're just going to call this my CPP. So you want to click on Third Person, C++, Desktop Maximum, and have your project name. And when you click Create, it's going to take a while to compile, so there is things happening in the background. So if you have a fast computer, it's not going to take very long. If you have a slow computer, it might take a few minutes. So once that compiles, I will be right back. Okay, so the editor has launched. So what we're going to do is, this is the third person template, so you can click play and run around. And what we're going to do is create a C++ file. So we have the my character here, C++ class, and we have the game mode. So what we're going to do is right click, create new C++ class, or you can go up here to tools and a new C++ class. It all depends on how you want to do it. And this is the class wizard. So if you're familiar with Unreal Engine and blueprints, then you know what these are. You have your actor, pawn, character. Of course, you have different classes that you can start with, and that's a good thing about Unreal. They give you some templates to start working with. You have Unreal interface, you have slate widget for your UI stuff, game state based, player state, HUD. So I'll go over that stuff in the future, but for now let's click on actor. Next. And what I like to do is put things in folders. So I go to public, items, and I am going to create an item class. And we're going to create class. And as you can see, it's compiling it. And we'll just go ahead and wait for that. And successful. Now sometimes it will fail, and what you want to do when that happens is there's a folder, and you want to go into here, into your folder where the project is, right click, and of course on Windows 11 you want to go show more options, and you click on generate Visual Studio project files. Go ahead and click that, and because sometimes when you open up the header and the CPP files, you'll see red, so where it just can't find the path for some reason. And it is correct, you don't have to do anything, but just go ahead and do generate Visual Studio files and it should clean it up. So let's go ahead and close this out. And that right there created public, items, and item C++ class. So the IDE that I'm using is Writer. This isn't a sponsored video. I just use it because I like it. Most people, when they start out, and when I started out, I used Visual Studio, which is a good IDE. I just like Writer better. And we're going to go ahead and click that. We're going to open it up. Okay, so when you open up the project in your IDE, you'll see engine folder. Don't worry about that. That's just the source files. You want to go into games, and of course this says loading because it's preparing the solution from Writer, and it's just scanning through all the files. Sometimes that takes a while, so I'm just going to go ahead and click pause. Okay, so right down here you want to install plugin in game. So if you're using Writer, you want to install the plugin in game. I did it to source one time, and it messed things up in the future. So always do, if you're using Writer, always do install plugins in game. And I'll just go ahead and let that run. Now what you have here is you have games, and then you have config and source. You want to go into source. Now under source, you have your project name. You want to go into there, and you have your private and your public folder. So when you click on that, you have your items, and of course, you already opened up. Now here in your header file, you have your public, protected, and the public section down here. And of course, there can be a private section. We'll just go ahead and create a private section because we're going to be needing that. And you have your constructor here, your A item. As you can see here, A item is a base class of a actor. So A item inherits from a actor. If you look at your character, this is the character. Now I'm not going to go over this. This is going to be in another video going over this in more detail. But your character inherits from a character. So I just wanted to go over that. Okay, so let's go back into the editor. So we have an item class. Now what you can do is you can still work with blueprints. You can create your classes. Like if you want to create, let's say, a health item or some kind of pickup item, whether it's a weapon, you can create item and right click and create blueprint class based on item. And what I'm going to do first is go into content. I'm just going to create a new folder, call this game, and then game, a new folder called items. So I'm going to go down here to the C++ items, right click, create blueprint class. Now I'm going to put this into items, and we're just going to call this first item. Create a blueprint class. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, so it doesn't always open up in another window, is go to Edit Preferences, go here to Asset Editor, Open Location, Main Window. Here we go. So now what you've done is created an item blueprint, and you can go in here and do all the blueprints you want. You don't need to write C++ code. You can just go ahead and use blueprints the way you want. And that is because this one, if you look down, it says parent class mycpp.item. So that is the parent class, is the C++ class that we created, and we just created a blueprint from that. So you can go in here and do all the blueprints you want. Now with the variables, you can come in here and you can create variables and work with it. So what I'm going to do is show you how to expose variables in C++ that you can start working with in blueprints. So the beauty of this is when you create a project like this, you can use C++ and blueprints together. So if you're not that good with C++ and you don't know how to do anything, go ahead and create a class, then create a blueprint from that I just showed you, and go ahead and do it in blueprints. And then once you learn how to do it in C++, you can come in and change it and remove it and then do it in C++. So that's the beauty of it, is go ahead and create a project in C++, do it how you know how to do it, and then learn it in C++, and then come back and refactor it. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create some base damage and more damage, and just something very simple. And also I'm going to show you how to expose things here on the right. So if we go into my C++, and I'm going to create a base damage and more damage. So it wants to be a float, and this is going to be base damage. Now, to expose things, we are going to use what is called a U property. Now, this comes from the reflection system. So you have different ones called U class, U struct, generated body, as you can see up here. You have U property and you have U function. So the best way to learn all of this, and I'm going to show you. Okay, so if you go to Google, this is the Unreal Engine docs. If you go to Google and type in Introduction to C++ Programming, there's no reason for me to go over in a video explaining all this when you can just go and read this yourself and review it, and you'll learn so much. So if you Google Introduction to C++ Programming, now this says in UE4. It is going to work in UE5, not a problem. So we come down here and it shows you C++ and blueprints, class wizard, goes over that. It goes over an example of creating classes, making properties show up in the editor. I'm going to show you that now. And setting defaults in the constructor, hot reloading, and I want to scroll down here and show you the reflection system. Yes, so right here we have the reflection system, and this is important, this right here. The features are opt-in, meaning you have to add the correct markup to your types, otherwise Unreal will ignore them and not generate the reflection data for them. Here's a quick overview of the basic markup. We have a U class, U struct, generated body, U property enables member variable, U class or U struct to be used on U property, and they are also used by the garbage collector to keep track of how many references there are to a U object. So U property and U function. U function enables class method, U class, U struct to be used, and U function. The function can allow the class method to be called from blueprints and used as RPCs, among other things. So I'm just going to go over this with you and show you real quick, but definitely go through this and learn the basics. This will definitely get you started. So right here in the header file, what we're going to do is we have a float base damage. Of course, the U property, we are going to expose that, and for U property you want to do edit, and you have edit in anywhere, edit inline, edit defaults only, and you can hover over these with Writer. I'm sure you can do it with Visual Studio, and it explains to you what it does. Now, edit anywhere. In the case of property, it can be edited by property windows on archetypes and instances. So we're just going to use edit anywhere. And we want it to be in blueprints. So blueprints read only or read and write. We're just going to do read and write. And we want to do category equals, and let's say we put it in combat. Now these parentheses, you don't have to do it if you're just using just a single name, that's fine. But if you use something like combat system, then you're going to need to put it into parentheses. I just use parentheses. I do it by default. It's just a habit. So this right here will allow you to edit the base damage, edit anywhere, and blueprint read write. You can call it from blueprints. And we're going to create another one, float more damage. And I'm just going to copy and paste that down there. And we're going to do a comment. This is base damage, or say base damage of item. And more damage from item. And right here, we're going to do more damage, and we have a function that we're going to call. And this is going to be a float do base damage. And of course, we are going to have the u function, and it's going to be a blueprint callable. And we're going to put in the category combat. So basically, we have a u function because we're going to have do base damage, and it's blueprint callable because we want to be able to use them blueprints, and we're going to put it in the category combat. Now this right here says I just need to create definition file, which automatically puts me in the CPP file. I'm going to go back to the header, and you can do this with Visual Studio as well. And now that it created that, what we're going to do is we are going to go over into the CPP file because we created base damage and more damage. So there's two ways to initiate values, and you do want to initiate values when you're doing things like that, because if not, it's just going to be 0, and you're going to get warnings when you build the game. So you can do it this way by doing a colon and just say base damage. And let's say we just do 10.f. Okay, and then you do more damage. I say 5.f because it's a float. Do not put that in there because it's going to not compile. So that's how you initiate values. Or you can just come in here into the constructor and do base damage equals 10.float, and do more damage equals 5. So that way you can do it as well. I really don't know which way is better. And of course we have the blueprint callable function do base damage. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to say float add damage, and of course that's base damage plus more damage. And because it's not void, which means void's not returning anything, we have a float, we need to return something. So we're going to go ahead and return add damage. And this little green line says, if you hover over it, local variable at damage can be made const. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's just make this const. And you want to go ahead and save it. Now, what this does, let's go back in the header file. We have base damage, and we made a U property, edit anywhere, blueprint, read write, category, combat. If you don't put the U property in there, it's not going to show up in the editor. So what's going to happen is that it's going to show up in the editor here. I'm going to go ahead and close this down, save it, and go ahead and compile. Now the first time you compile from the IDE, it's going to take a while. That's because it's the first time you've done it. And it will take a while because it has to go through all the files. As you can see here, it's going through all of them because it's the first time. Then after that, when you make, let's say you go in there and you make a small change and you compile again, launch the editor, it's not going to take as long. So I just wanted to let you know that. Okay, so it compiled and launched the editor. Okay, so the editor is launched. And of course, compiling, sometimes it takes a while for the first time, or if you make some big changes and then you compile it, it can take a little bit longer. So right now, we've added those, and let's go into game, items, and we have blueprint class. We have a blueprint class. You know what? Let's go ahead and rename this to blueprint and open that up. So we have a blueprint class of first item. As you can see here to the right, we have category combat, and of course we have base damage, initialized value of 10, and more damage with initialized value of 5. So that's why we put the U property edit anywhere in there, so we can have those exposed. So because before, what you would do is you just go down here to blueprints and click on variables. So now we have, you can right click and you can do base damage. As you can see here, it's under combat category, get base damage, set base damage. So you can do set base damage. So you can go ahead and call those inside there. And we also have the do base damage. That is the U function, do base damage, that we created. We have a return value. So what you would do is, before, you would just come in here, and let's say we want to create a item with a static mesh that when you begin overlap, it does damage. So normally what you would do is you would just come in here and go to static mesh. You would go in here to static mesh, add the static mesh, and then you would go in here and type in spear collision, and then you would add that, and then you would go in here into your blueprints and go ahead and do begin overlap and apply the damage and things like that. But what we are going to do is I'm going to show you how to create a component. These are components here. We're going to add a static mesh component and a spear component. And the way we are going to do that is we are going to go back to the IDE. I'm just going to go ahead and close this down. We're going to go back to the IDE, and now we're going to create a component. So here under the private section, we want to create a static mesh component and a sphere component. Now, to create this, we want to do class uStatic mesh component. Make sure it's component. And we have to do a pointer, and we'll just call this item mesh. So we have to forward declare it uStatic mesh component, and it's a pointer and item mesh. Now the reason we're doing it this way is because, well, you have to do forward declare it, because you're just telling it to be like, well, trust me, I'm going to be using the static mesh component within the CPP file. Now, in order to have this exposed, we need a U property, and we want to go to edit anywhere, blueprint, read write, let's just read only, and we want to category item properties and allow private access. So whenever you're in the private here, as you can see, if you try to do it how we did it up here in the public section, edit anywhere, blueprint read only, category equals item properties, you're going to see an error. Blueprint read only should not be used on private members. So what we need to do is we need to use meta equals allow private access equals true. And of course we need a comma. Now there are different meta equals that you can use. This is just allow private access. You can go into Unreal Documents and this will tell you, just go to Google and type in Unreal Engine uProperty documentation, and it should explain all of this inside here. So there's different things that you can use, but most of the time you're just going to be doing meta allow private access. So that gives us a uStatic mesh component. That is the same thing that you would do like in blueprints when you do add. So what we're going to do is the same thing, but we're going to do a sphere. So class, or declare it, sphere component. And we're just going to call this sphere component. So what that does, sorry about that, drinking my morning coffee. So what that does is create a sphere component. Now what we need to do is we need to go into the C++ file, CPP file. Because whenever you create that, like a uStatic mesh, uProperty, there's other things that you can create inside. So in order for it to show up in the IDE, we have to use it. So let's do item mesh equals create default sub object. I do not know why they call it create default sub object. Wish it was something different. And what are we creating? We are creating a uStatic mesh component. And we want to say the text. Let's just call this mesh. Now, you want to set it as a root component. So set root component item mesh. So what this is doing is it will set the item mesh as the root component. Set root component to be specified component. New root components owner should be this actor. True if successful. And now that we've created the item a mesh, we need to do the sphere component equals create default subobject. And inside here, the class T return type, we just do use sphere component. And we want to call this sphere. Now, sphere component, we want to set up attachment. So we want to attach it to the root component. So get root component. So now what we've done is we've created the item mesh. So let's go back to the header file. We've created use static mesh component, and we has a pointer, and it's item mesh, and we forward declare it. Class use sphere component, sphere component. We make these view properties, edit anywhere, blueprint, read only, category, item properties, and allow private access because it's in the private section. So go to CPP file, and the constructor up here, we've initialized the values, and we are creating a mesh component, item mesh, create default subobject, and of course the text is just mesh. You can put whatever you want here. And sphere component, create default object, use sphere component, and set up attachment, you attach it to get root components. So let's go ahead and save this and compile. Okay, so now we're back in the editor. Let's go over to game items, first item. And right here, we have item mesh and we have a sphere component. We have base damage and more damage. So now that we've created this, you click on item mesh and it looks just like it would if you would have went in here and added static mesh. So let's go ahead and do a static mesh. Let's go ahead and do that. And it will create it. We click on sphere. And let's go ahead and, I'll say it's 200. Yeah. And so now what we can do is we can just go in here and click on sphere, add event, add on component, begin overlap. So now we can just do cast to third person, other actor, and do base damage. So we're just doing a simple component begin overlap. When the third person overlaps it, do the base damage. And let's just do print string. And the return value is going to be this. So we created item mesh, we created a sphere. We just go in here, right click, add event, begin overlap. We cast it to the third person character. And from there, we're going to do base damage. And then we're going to print string out. And the return value of do base damage, because we did the return value here, do base damage plus more damage, return add damage. So let's go ahead and play. And of course, what we need to do is we need to add the item to the level. So we have our first item blueprint. Let's go in here, and now we can run around, and as you can see up there in the top left, we did 15 damage. So it's pretty easy to just come in here and let's say we want it to be 20 and 10. So we're just going to go ahead and change that. So whenever you change things inside here, it's going to override what you initialized in your C++ file. And this is the beauty of C++ and Blueprint. So you can create the logic in C++, and then you can have someone else do all the Blueprint stuff inside here, and then you can have like the person that's designing it. It might not be you, it might be somebody else on the team, and they can just come in here and change these numbers around. So now when we go ahead and click play, as you can see now it's doing 30 because we set it within the editor. So that's the basics of getting an item in there and using C++ with blueprints. As you can see here, it can be pretty powerful. Now this we can all do in C++, but I'm not going to go over that. I just wanted to show how you can create a C++ file, create some variables, do a little bit of logic in there, and go ahead and use it within blueprints. So within your project, what you can do if you've created it with a C++, you can go ahead and start using the variables and try to do a little bit of logic, and then adding it, as we did here, this function, do base damage, and add it into your blueprint project or your blueprint here. But make sure you're not going to be able to use C++ if you create a project and you create blueprints. So you have to create a project with the two options when you create it is blueprint or C++. You want to do C++ because the beauty of it is you can use C++ and blueprints together. So now that we have this working, you can come in here and let's say you want to destroy the actor. You can come in here and say destroy actor. But what I would like to do is we're going to close this out, and then in our C++ file we can have return damage and you're returning add damage. So after you're doing the damage, let's say we can just come in here and just say destroy, and if you hover over this, destroy this actor, returns true. The actor is destroyed or already marked for destruction. So now we can just go ahead and come up here, Control F5 to compile. And this will launch the editor again. Build succeeded, it's launching. And of course you can just do the hot reload if you want. And now when we click play, comes in here, destroys the actor, and does 30 damage. So that is it for this video.